It's Poohin' time, y'all. The sequel to unironically my favorite film of last year has arrived. Now I know I'm late to the party. The movie came out in March, and at the time of writing, it's near mid-September. And that's for a multitude of reasons. One being, it was only in theaters for one day, and then there was no way to watch it until June, and by then I was already doing a ton of other stuff, including new videos. But finally, I have seen it. And boy howdy, it was worth the wait. For background on what this movie even is, all the way back in 2022, the original Winnie the Pooh book was released into the public domain after 95 years, making Winnie the Pooh a public domain character alongside King Arthur, Sherlock Holmes, and Robin Hood. Anyone could now use Winnie the Pooh in any way they wanted. So obviously, one of the first things to be made was projects that couldn't be made under Disney otherwise, such as horror movies. So indie film studio Jagged Edge Productions, known for such total masterpieces as Dinosaur Hotel and The Curse of the Humpty Dumpty, began working on one. And it released in early 2023, just under a year after Winnie the Pooh entered the public domain, and this movie went viral. Because of how weird it was for the general audience to see this kind of horror movie. Nowadays, public domain horror movies are a dime a dozen. A new one comes out pretty much every week. But this was really the first time people saw a character so synonymous with children's media be the star of a grotesque, bloody horror movie. Its uniqueness is what got it such fame. And Jagged Edge was able to get it a release in theaters for one day. And I was one of the lucky few to see it on the big screen. To which I came out absolutely adoring it. Not in a so bad it's good way, but for real. Now if you want to know why I love this film so much, I made an entire review last year detailing everything, which you can find in the top right corner on desktop. But you just need to know that I really do think the first film was perfect. Every part, from the cinematography, to the music, to the set, to the acting, and especially the fantastic story, I really do love this movie. And I've strangely loved it more and more over time and over rewatches, to where I think I was way too harsh on the movie in that first review, and I actually disagree with a lot of those old criticisms. For me, it's just a perfect movie, and it went far above what anyone expected it to be. But I was in the extreme minority, and pretty much everybody ranged from thinking it was fine to thinking it was the worst movie ever made. It even had 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, despite the bad reviews, the movie still made over $5 million, making back over 100 times the budget, and putting it on the list of the most profitable movies ever made. So no shit they would make a sequel. My expectations were high. They made the first movie on a shoestring budget, with the actors and filmmakers having near no experience making a major motion picture, and it still turned out to be my #1 movie of all of 2023, and one of my top 10 horror movies, period. So now, with a massive increase in budget, talent, and experience, my expectations were as high as can be. The budget was increased over 10 times the previous. The first Blood and Honey was made with a measly $50,000, and now this one's being made with over $500,000. And this film would be the launch of an entire cinematic universe, the Poohniverse, with every future movie in this universe hinging on the quality of this very movie. So needless to say, expectations were high. And now it's released, and I finally got a chance to see it. And what do I think? Well, it's not as good as the first, but it is very close. Starting off, if there's one thing that was missing from the first film, it was that it didn't exactly have the feel of a big Hollywood movie. And that's not to say it didn't feel cinematic. It just didn't have the grandiose 4K vibe of something like the new Halloween movies. But this movie, holy shit, does it feel like a real blockbuster. The budget definitely shows. It feels so much more realistic. And that might also be due to the new prosthetics for Pooh and Friends. The first film just used rubber masks, but now they have full makeup and prosthetics. And personally, while I would want them to keep the designs more accurate to the original movie, they still look amazing. They are just so expressive. They feel so much more realistic and human. They don't have to hide their facial features. They can really zoom in and show the pure expressions of the characters. It just adds way more immersion. They really flesh out the world and the story. They add in so many new settings and characters. Speaking of which, all the new characters are great. Christopher Robin's parents were very likable. Same with his younger sister. They feel like great additions to the cast. One other thing that I really do like is that they build off the previous film's plot. They explore the impact of the previous film's events, especially on the character of Christopher Robin. He's ostracized, accused of being a killer, and he just does his best to try to redeem what he believed he caused. He feels guilt over abandoning Pooh, which led to Pooh becoming a killer and committing the 100-Acre Wood massacre. In Christopher's mind, that blood is on his hands, so he dedicates his time working at a hospital, trying to save lives, to hopefully make up for the lives he feels responsible for taking. They make Christopher Robin, and all of the new characters, feel like real people with arcs and personalities. They aren't just checkboxes for a kill count. And this same praise can apply to the animal characters as well. One of the best aspects of the first movie is the backstory and characterization of Pooh and Piglet. The movie was centered on them and their motivations, and they continue to give a lot of characterization to Pooh and Friends. They fully flesh out the personalities of all of them, from Pooh to Piglet, making them stand out as characters and feel more real, and that is partly because they gave them a lot of dialogue. The dialogue elevates them a lot, especially with the newly introduced animals. I absolutely love how they introduce the owl and this movie's other new animals. One of my biggest questions going into this film was how they would introduce the new animals, given how the first film makes it pretty clear Pooh and Piglet were on their own. But they figured it out, and they nailed it. It's a great part of the story, and it isn't gone into a ton, but it is one of my highlights of the film. They say how characters like the owl and Tigger were actually a part of their group all the way back when they were kids with Christopher Robin. But when that winter came, the winter of drought where Pooh and Piglet ate Eeyore, that caused the owl to flee, because obviously he can fly. So he just dipped and flew far, far away, to the other side of the 100-Acre Woods. And Tigger, just like the others at that time, was going insane. But Tigger was going full rabid, a complete uncontrollable killing machine, and he was so dangerous that Pooh and Piglet banished him to their cave, locking him inside a cell, only using him as a tool to get more food. And fast forward, after the events of the first movie, Pooh and Piglet went back to being ne'er-do-wells, lurking in the forest, periodically picking off victims for food. But over the span of the next year, humans started to expand into the forest, with houses, stores, that kind of stuff, and it became harder and harder for Pooh and Friends to stay alive, especially since winter was closely approaching. But one day, the owl returned to them. It's because the forest area he was living in was taken over and flattened by the humans, and he had no choice but to return to his old friends. And the owl, now seeking revenge on humanity, convinces Pooh, Piglet, and Tigger to stand up for themselves, to play on the offensive when they had been on the defensive for so long. I really like this plotline. This explains why they would strike a full year after the first film, instead of just right after. It's smart. Pooh liked being in the shadows, but through a mix of the owl's influence and the destruction of their land, they had no choice but to invade civilization. And it's a good reflection on real life. how the destruction of our forests have led to animals invading humanity because they have nowhere else to go, such as herons invading Chicago, and many other examples. And this also explains why we didn't see Tigger in the last movie. Because they locked him up, and it wasn't until the owl came in that they decided to set him free to use him as a weapon. Speaking of Tigger, I love the way he's portrayed. He's basically just Freddy Krueger, with all the one-liners and such. It's a great way to differentiate him from the rest of the animals. Now, outside the plot, there are some other aspects that I do want to acknowledge. One being the CGI. I very much appreciate that they used the CGI sparingly, and stuck to purely practical effects, for both the characters and kills. The only times they really did use CGI was for a couple of kills that couldn't be done practically, and Tigger's tail, which looks great. Now, I've been doing just positives so far, but I do have some negatives. First of all, I'm kinda mixed on the new actor for Christopher Robin. He feels off. Like, he's always smiling or grinning, he never seems serious, and when the movie is about a bloody massacre, a chippy attitude doesn't really fit. His line deliveries are just so weird and stilted, and that's not to say the original actors wasn't as well, but every other actor in the movie feels like they could have a role in a big movie, and when he's surrounded by other actors that are frankly much more professional, he kinda sticks out. But my biggest personal gripe about the movie is the origin they give for Pooh and Friends. Because, and spoiler alert, turns out that every one of the characters, from Pooh to Piglet to Tigger to even the owl, were all genetic experiments by one rogue scientist decades ago. And they reveal the twist that Winnie the Pooh is actually Christopher Robin's long-lost brother, who was kidnapped to be experimented on when they were children. What the fuck? I don't really get why they took the plot in this direction. The whole movie is building up to it too. It's an overarching subplot about Christopher being haunted by his brother being kidnapped and remembered seeing it, but not remembering who did it. And eventually he remembers, thanks to a voodoo therapist, don't ask, and then that dude he remembered told him that back in the day, a scientist experimented on a bunch of kids and turned them into anthropomorphic animal thingies. Then he fucking kills himself, and Chrissy Boy puts two and two together. It's definitely not what I expected from this movie. Now they could have easily messed up that and completely ruined the movie. But even though I'm not a fan of that story point in general, they still make it work in the movie itself. Which is crazy, considering how bonkers of a twist it is to make Pooh the long-lost brother of Christopher. It's an interesting story, but I just don't like the idea. I've personally always liked the idea that they were just Bigfoot-style creatures, a missing link between humans and animals, descendants of some long-lost race of hybrids. Something like that. But that's just me, and the plot they did go with works within the confines of the story. Now, jumping to another topic, something very important to any horror movie is the kills. And the kills are amazing. It is an amazing idea to give Pooh, a bear trap as a weapon. It's just perfect. I guess you could say the kills in the first film are more impactful, probably just because of how few and far between they actually were, but these kills are definitely the most creative. My personal favorite is the bear trap decapitation and the head driller one. I can't show them on YouTube, but if you know, you know. Some of the kills are pretty goofy and comical, ones you can't really take seriously, but they play into that. I think that goofiness is intentional. They've clearly seen the reaction to the first movie. They know how badly looked upon their movies are. So they play into that. It's a really smart move. And for some people, it makes the movie more enjoyable for them. And rounding things out, in the first segment of the credits, they show concept drawings of the future movies in the Pooniverse. And holy shit, they look so good! Pinocchio looks freaky as hell, a really good design. Peter Pan looks like a great twisted version of the one from the Disney film. And my personal favorite, the Bambi one. Ever since they announced the Bambi horror movie, my personal headcanon idea for it would be that Bambi would be going on a rampage after a hunter kills his mom, and he consumes radioactive waste, making him a zombified, rabid killing machine of a deer. And from the looks of it, they're doing exactly that. This twisted childhood universe looks awesome. The Bambi horror movie's coming later this year. Peter Pan is coming next February, and late 2025 is for the massive crossover movie. And if this film is anything to go by, then this is gonna be a wild ride. Overall, Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 is excellent. I have very little criticisms. They upped the ante in every way. It's everything a sequel should be. They lived up to my hype. And I can't believe it's taken me this long to see it. But what did you think? I'm almost sure I'm in the complete minority, but maybe there's other people who like these movies as much as me. Tell me in the comments. And thank you for watching.